Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inshallah, today we will continue the introduction to the series, Science from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Science, History, and the Soul in Islam. Since prayer is only 7 minutes away, what I'll do is to give you an introduction of what we'll cover today. And then when we come back, inshallah, we'll expand upon them. In the discussions today, look for some very important elements that determine the shape of the edifice of Islam. Look for how the Quran came to be documented. Look for the principle of legitimacy in Islam, whether the shura, the principle of shura, or election, if you would, or democracy, or the kingship, hereditary inheritance of the rule in Islam, whether any of these are acceptable from an Islamic point of view. Look for the important influence of wealth in human history. Faith and wealth are two of the important drivers in human affairs. Look for how faith and wealth interplay with each other, and they did in the initial phase of Islamic history, and how that shaped the shape of things to come. Because all of these things had an impact on the development of fiqh. People confuse fiqh to mean sharia. Sharia is very different from fiqh. Sharia is the unchanging word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereas fiqh is the application of the principles of sharia to human affairs. Look for how the principles were developed in the early stages of Islam. Look for how the wealth from Iran influenced the Arabs and how that contributed to the onset of the civil wars, which culminated in the tragedy of Karbala. Look for how even in the Umayyad period there were instances, there were periods when we had towering personalities who influence history in such basic ways, fundamental ways, that it changed the character of Iran and Egypt. It's a very broad landscape that I'm going to cover today. And some of you probably ask yourselves, well, where does all this information come from? I'll give you some references today. One of the important ones is this book in here is Tarikh Ibn Kathir, the history written by Ibn Kathir. It is in 13 volumes. I've had it for about 20 years, huge volumes. Those of you who are serious in reading about history ought to acquire it. Another one is Tarikh Ibn Khaldun, and this also is in 12 volumes, large compendium of contributions that these giants made. Both of them lived in the 14th century. Ibn Kathir was about one generation before Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Kathir is very deep in terms of details. If you're looking for what each person did from the time of the Prophet ﷺ till the 14th century, which is about the onset of the Crusades and the Mongol invasions, then you should read Ibn Kathir. But if you're looking for the principles of history, how history evolves and how people live up to or don't live up to the principles of Islam and the principles of historical evolution, then read Ibn Khaldun. Then I will also recommend to you a book that probably is not available anymore. It is called The Law of Civilization and Decay by Brooks Adams. This was published 120 years ago. In here, he has traced the evolution of the banking system If you want to understand contemporary history, you must know the role that money plays in contemporary affairs. You must know how the bankers evolved out of the merchants, who in turn evolved out of an agrarian economy. This is a very good book. If you can catch hold of it, I would highly recommend it to especially the young people, those who have an interest in history, because this will enable you to concisely understand how evolution takes place in human affairs. And lastly, this is a book I'm sure many of you have read, The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. Those of you who are from South Asia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, highly recommend it, because this was the genesis of Iqbal's thoughts, and also it was the quintessence of his thoughts, political thought, I should say, not the Sufi thought, because the man was so great, he had many different angles. Written in 1931, given first as lectures in Allahabad and Madras, and later compiled under this document, which formed the basis for the genesis of the idea of Pakistan, and hence influenced the politics of South Asia, which in turn has influenced the politics of the world, and it continues today. So these are some references. Of course, there are other major references as well. Again, to orient all of this distinguished group of people as to what our approach to history and science and culture is, we'll look upon it as signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not read history as a compendium of events. Who did what to whom does not matter. What matters is, how did that event influence the human struggle on earth? How did it correspond to or did not correspond to the injunctions from the Quran? And if you're very deep into the study of the Quran, know that the principles of history are given very concisely in Wal Asr, Innal insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. You need not go any further, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the direction as to how human beings progress, that is, attain their falah, and how they come apart. For those of you who do not understand Arabic, I'll translate it roughly. Wal Asr, this passage cannot be translated. One can talk about them for ages and ages. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath by what Asr, the passage of time. Time has been referred to in the Quran 16 different ways, not just once. Most scholars, even I'll refer in the later lectures as to the errors that even great scholars that Al-Ghazali fell into, because they did not comprehend the nature of time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath by the passage of time. Wal Asr, Innal insana lafi khusr. Again, another emphasis, inna. Insan, humankind, is at a loss. Innal insana lafi khusr. La. See, the word la also is a third level of emphasis. So there are three levels of emphasis in here. From the highest level of emphasis, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath, to emphasis, to a subtle emphasis. Innal insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu, except such as those who have, amanu means certainty of faith. Again, very good. Inshallah, we'll come back.